The Crimson Nexus Military Institute floated in the gravitational sweet spot between two red dwarf stars, which was either poetic symbolism or extremely poor urban planning, depending on who you asked. The station had been constructed approximately 2 centuries ago by the Coalition of Armed Forces, a fancy name for what was essentially a military alliance between species who decided that shooting each other was less profitable than shooting at common enemies together. The Institute trained officers, tacticians, and elite combat specialists from 47 different species, each convinced their particular evolutionary path had granted them superiority in warfare. They were all wrong, but nobody had bothered to check the math. The Institute operated on a strict meritocracy, which was the official line parroted in every recruitment advertisement and promotional material. The actual truth was slightly more complicated and significantly more depressing. Merit, it turned out, was measured by standards set by species who'd been part of the coalition for centuries, fighting wars in ways that favored their specific physiologies, tactics, and cultural assumptions about what combat should look like. If your species happened to match those assumptions, congratulations. You had merit. If not, well, there was always logistics division. Humans had been admitted to the Institute 5 years ago, right after their planet joined the coalition, following what historians politely called first contact, and what actually amounted to accidentally flying a colony ship into a Veltorian battle fleet and somehow not getting immediately vaporized. The coalition had been impressed by humanity's sheer audacity and mildly concerned by their apparent lack of self-preservation instinct. After extensive deliberation, they'd granted Earth provisional membership status, which came with all the benefits of coalition membership and absolutely none of the respect. The Institute's current human enrollment stood at 43 cadets out of approximately 8,000 total students. Those 43 were scattered across various programs, specializations, and barracks assignments in a way that definitely wasn't deliberate isolation, but sure looked a lot like it. They were subjected to the same rigorous training as everyone else, held to the same standards, given the same opportunities to prove themselves. They were also, universally and without exception, expected to fail. Instructor Vexral stood at the front of the tactical combat simulation theater, his 4 primary arms crossed while his 2 secondary arms manipulated the holographic display. He was Kulathi, a species that had evolved from pack hunters on a high-gravity death world where everything was poisonous and most things were on fire. The Kulathi had survived by developing enhanced reflexes, redundant nervous systems, and a cultural belief that anything worth doing was worth doing violently. They made excellent soldiers and absolutely terrible philosophers. Today's exercise, Vexral announced, his voice carrying the harmonics that came from having 3 separate larynxes, will focus on close quarters combat assessment. You will demonstrate the techniques covered in the past 6 weeks. Your performance will account for 30% of your term grade. The assembled cadets, roughly 60 of them in this particular cohort, sat in the tiered seating that surrounded the central combat arena. It was a circular space, about 30 meters across, equipped with impact absorption flooring, medical scanners embedded in every surface, and force field projectors that could stop anything short of a tactical nuclear weapon. The Institute took safety seriously, mostly because dead cadets were terrible for enrollment numbers. Combat pairs have been assigned based on weight class and experience level, Vexral continued, pulling up a roster on the holographic display. You will face an opponent of similar capability to ensure fair evaluation. In the 3rd row, Maya Rodriguez sat quietly and tried not to laugh at the transparent lie. She'd been at the Institute for 18 months, which was long enough to understand that similar capability was code for, we're going to match you against someone who should absolutely crush you and then act surprised when it happens. She was, according to official records, 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. She came from a standard gravity world, possessed no natural armor, no venom glands, no enhanced sensory organs, and had the kind of physical specifications that made military recruiters check if they'd accidentally pulled up veterinary records instead. What the official records didn't mention, because she'd been extremely careful about what information made it into official records, was that Maya Rodriguez had spent 8 years in various conflicts across Earth before the coalition had even known humanity existed. She'd been recruited by one of those organizations that technically didn't exist and definitely didn't conduct operations that violated international law. She'd learned to fight from people who'd learned to fight from people who'd learned to fight during wars that predated written language. She'd gotten very good at it. Rodriguez, Vexral's voice cut through her thoughts. You'll be paired with Drakthar for evaluation. The theater went quiet in that particular way. That meant something interesting was about to happen. Maya looked up at the display, found her name next to another, and felt something cold and sharp settle in her stomach. Drakthar was Korthvin, which meant he was approximately 7.5 feet of crystalline exoskeleton and barely contained aggression. The Korthvin had evolved on a world with 3 times Earth's gravity, under a star that put out enough radiation to turn most organic life into tumors with ambition. They'd survived by developing silicon-based biological structures that were functionally indestructible, and a metabolism that ran on what other species considered toxic waste. They were, by every measurable standard, perfect soldiers. Strong, durable, aggressive, and completely convinced of their own superiority. Drakthar stood up from his seat in the front row, his crystalline structure catching the theater lights and reflecting them in sharp, angular patterns. He was the cohort's top-ranked combat specialist, had never lost a training exercise, and had a documented tendency to put opponents in the medical bay with injuries that took days to heal, even with advanced treatment. He was also, and this was the part that made Maya's jaw tighten, a complete piece of work. The human? Drakthar's voice resonated through his entire body structure, a trick of Korthvin physiology that made everything they said sound vaguely threatening. Instructor, surely this is a mistake. I am ranked 1st in close combat. She is ranked 40th. This is not similar capability. Your ranking is based on performance against other cadets, Vexral replied, though his tone suggested he agreed with the assessment. Rodriguez has not yet been properly evaluated in live combat scenarios. This will provide that evaluation. Translation. Let's see how badly the human gets broken, so we can justify moving her to a non-combat role. Maya stood up slowly, gathering her things. Around her, cadets were already pulling up betting interfaces on their personal devices. She could see the odds updating in real time. 100 to 1 against her lasting more than 30 seconds. 200 to 1 against her landing a hit. 500 to 1 against her actually winning. Someone was going to make a lot of money today. Probably not her, but someone. This is absurd, Drakthar continued, apparently not satisfied with just humiliating her in combat. The human species has no business in military training. They are weak, slow, fragile. They come from a soft world with soft gravity and soft evolutionary pressures. They have no natural advantages, no specialized adaptations, nothing that qualifies them for combat roles. Several cadets nodded agreement. A few looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. The rest just looked excited for the show. Maya reached the stairs leading down to the combat arena and paused, looking up at Drakthar with an expression of polite interest. "Are you done?" she asked. Drakthar's crystalline structure shifted colors, darkening to a deep crimson that indicated aggression. "You should withdraw. Save yourself the humiliation and the injury. I will not hold back because you are inferior." "Good," Maya said simply, and continued down the stairs. The combat arena floor felt solid under her boots, the kind of engineered surface that could absorb kinetic impacts without breaking, but still provided enough friction for proper movement. Maya walked to the center, rolling her shoulders, loosening her neck. She was wearing the standard Institute training uniform, reinforced synthetic fabric that could handle most impacts, flexible enough for full range of motion, equipped with biometric sensors that would alert medical teams if anything important stopped working. Across from her, Drakthar descended to the arena with all the subtlety of an avalanche. His footsteps resonated through the floor, each one a small demonstration of his mass and power. He was playing to the crowd, making sure everyone understood the size differential, the strength differential, the everything differential. Maya watched him and did calculations. Mass, approximately 400 pounds. Height advantage, 26 inches. Reach advantage, significant. Center of gravity, high. Movement pattern, aggressive forward pressure. Crystalline structure, extremely durable but rigid. Joints, limited flexibility. Weak points. She'd figure those out. "Combat parameters," Vexrol announced from above. "Standard sparring rules. Fight continues until submission, incapacitation, or instructor intervention. Medical override will engage automatically if life-threatening injuries are detected. Force fields will contain the combat area." He paused, and Maya could hear the calculation in that pause, the institutional bias making itself comfortable. Given the significant physical disparity between combatants, Drakthar will be limited to 50% power output. The theater erupted in protest. Drakthar's crystalline structure flashed with indignation. "Instructor, this is insulting. I need no handicap to defeat a human." "The limitation is for safety purposes," Vexrol replied, though his tone made it clear he agreed with Drakthar. "We cannot risk serious injury over a training exercise." Maya said nothing. 50% of Drakthar's strength was still more than enough to break her bones if he landed a solid hit. The power limitation was theater, a way to make the inevitable beating look responsible and measured. "Fine," Drakthar snarled. "I will defeat her with half my strength. It will make no difference." "Combatants ready?" Vexrol asked. Maya settled into a neutral stance, weight balanced, hands loose. She looked small and vulnerable and completely outmatched, which was exactly how she needed to look. "Ready," Drakthar announced. "Ready," Maya said quietly. "Begin." Drakthar attacked immediately, because of course he did. Patience was not a Korthvan virtue. He covered the distance between them in 2 massive strides. Crystalline fist pulled back for a strike that would have knocked her unconscious if it landed. It didn't land. Maya moved laterally, letting the punch whistle past her head close enough to feel the displacement of air. Drakthar's momentum carried him forward, and she noted how his upper body committed fully to the strike, how his center of gravity shifted, how his rear leg extended for power. Good to know. He recovered quickly, spinning to face her with surprising speed for something his size. His second attack came as a combination. High strike, low sweep, attempting to catch her between 2 impacts. Maya ducked under the high strike and jumped over the sweep, neither defense particularly elegant, but both effective. She landed and immediately retreated, opening distance. The crowd was already laughing. The human was running. The human was barely surviving. This would be over soon. Drakthar pressed forward, and Maya let him come. She defended, blocked what she could, evaded what she couldn't, and absorbed information. His attacks followed patterns: high, low, high, left, right, center. He had preferred combinations, trained responses, muscle memory written into his crystalline structure over thousands of hours of practice. He was good. Technically proficient, powerful, fast enough to be dangerous. He was also predictable. 2 minutes into the fight, Maya hadn't landed a single strike. She'd defended, evaded, retreated, looking increasingly desperate to the observers above. Drakthar was playing to them now, his attacks becoming more theatrical, more demonstrative. Each near miss was accompanied by what might have been laughter, a resonant frequency that rattled through his entire structure. "Is this the best humanity offers?" he taunted. "Is this what your species calls a warrior?" Maya didn't respond. She was counting, timing, measuring the exact duration between his attack combinations, the precise angle of his joint articulation, the micro-adjustments his balance made before each strike. 3 minutes. Drakthar's breathing pattern changed. Not much, but there. His attacks lost maybe 2% of their speed. His recovery time increased by fractions of a second. Korthvin physiology was incredibly efficient, but it still required oxygen, still generated waste heat, still accumulated muscular fatigue, even if that fatigue took longer to manifest than it would in most species. 4 minutes. The crowd was getting bored. This wasn't a fight anymore, just a human playing keep away until she made an inevitable mistake. Drakthar thought the same thing. His attacks became more aggressive, less technical. He was trying to end it, to land the spectacular knockout that would cement his superiority. His right arm pulled back for his signature strike, the one he'd used to win the cohort championship. His weight shifted forward. His left side opened slightly for balance. Maya stopped retreating. She moved forward, inside his reach, and drove her fist into the joint connection between his left arm and torso. Not hard. She didn't have the mass for hard, but precisely. The impact sent vibrations through his crystalline structure in ways that structure wasn't designed to handle. Drakthar's left arm locked up, the joint temporarily disrupted. Before he could recover, Maya was already targeting his right knee, the same principle. Force applied at the exact angle, the exact moment, to disrupt rather than damage. His leg buckled. The crowd stopped laughing. Drakthar roared, swinging wildly now. But wild didn't work when your opponent had spent 4 minutes learning every tell, every habit, every predictable response. Maya flowed around his attacks like water around stone, and each time she moved, she struck. Joint connections, nerve cluster analogs, stress points in his crystalline structure. None of the strikes did significant damage. That wasn't the point. The point was accumulation, degradation, systematic dismantling of his ability to fight effectively. Humans had learned millions of years ago that they couldn't beat predators through strength. They'd beaten them through persistence, through intelligence, through the ability to adapt and exploit weaknesses. That knowledge was written into human DNA, refined through countless generations of being prey that refused to die easily. Maya was very good at refusing to die easily. 5 minutes. Drakthar was breathing hard now, his crystalline structure showing stress fractures from accumulated impacts. His movements had slowed by 15%. His attack patterns had collapsed into desperate combinations. He was still dangerous, still capable of killing her with one lucky hit. Lucky wasn't happening today. Maya stepped inside his guard one more time, and this time she didn't target joints or nerve clusters. She targeted his center of gravity. Her shoulder drove into his chest, while her legs swept his supporting knee, and 400 pounds of Korthvin warrior crashed to the arena floor with a sound like a chandelier falling downstairs. Before he could rise, Maya was on his back, one arm wrapped around his neck in a chokehold that wouldn't work on his physiology, but didn't need to. Her other hand found a specific point on his crystalline structure, a stress concentration where the silicon-based material was thinnest, and she pressed. Not hard enough to break. The force fields wouldn't allow that. Hard enough to make it very clear she could break it if she wanted to. Yield, she said quietly, just for him. Drakthar tried to buck her off, failed, tried to reach back to grab her, couldn't get the angle. His crystalline structure was flashing colors rapidly now, aggression mixing with something that might have been fear. Yield, Maya repeated, adding another 5 pounds of pressure to that stress point. Drakthar's structure flashed twice in rapid succession, the Korthvan signal for submission. Maya released immediately, rolling away and standing in one smooth motion. Her hands were up, non-threatening, signaling she was done. The combat arena was completely silent. Medical teams rushed in, surrounding Drakthar, scanning him for damage. Stress fractures throughout his structure, temporary joint disruption, elevated stress hormones, but nothing permanent. Nothing that wouldn't heal in a few days. Everything that would be remembered for much longer. Maya walked to the edge of the combat arena, breathing hard, but controlled. Her uniform was intact. She had no visible injuries. She looked exactly like someone who just had a light sparring session, not someone who'd systematically dismantled a superior opponent. In the observation theater, the silence stretched. Cadets stared at their betting interfaces, watching odds that had seemed like free money evaporate into financial losses. Others stared at Maya like she'd just turned into something else. Something that didn't match their assumptions about humans. Instructor Vexaral descended to the arena floor, his 4 primary arms moving in what might have been agitation. He approached Maya, his 3-part voice carrying harmonics she couldn't quite interpret. "Explain," he said finally. "Explain how that happened." Maya shrugged. "He attacked first. I defended. He made mistakes. I exploited them. Standard combat doctrine." "You were outmatched in every physical category." "Yes, sir." "He had superior strength, superior durability, superior reach." "Yes, sir." "Then how?" "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Vexral's secondary arms made a gesture that probably meant yes. "Physical advantages matter," Maya said carefully. "But they're not decisive. Combat is about decision-making under pressure, pattern recognition, tactical adaptation, and willingness to do what's necessary to win. Those aren't physical traits. Those are cognitive traits, and humans are very, very good at them." She paused, then added, "Also, I spent 4 minutes learning how he fights. He spent 4 minutes assuming he'd already won. That's a different kind of advantage." Vexral stared at her with all 4 of his eyes, which was an unsettling experience. "You're saying you won through intelligence. I'm saying I won through being willing to use intelligence. There's a difference." In the medical area, Drakthar was sitting up, his crystalline structure slowly returning to its normal color. He was listening to this conversation, and his expression, as much as Korthvan had expressions, suggested he was having a very significant reevaluation of several deeply held beliefs. "The power limitation," Vexral said suddenly. "You knew it wouldn't matter." "I knew it might matter if he landed a solid hit," Maya corrected. "So I made sure he didn't land a solid hit. The best defense is not being where the attack is. That's not standard doctrine." "No, sir. That's human doctrine. We've been fighting things stronger than us for a very long time. We've learned a few tricks." Vexaral was silent for a long moment, his secondary arms moving through what might have been calculation or might have been concern. Finally, he turned to address the entire theater. "Let this be a lesson," he announced, his three-part voice carrying to every corner. "Physical superiority is meaningless if you cannot apply it effectively. Drakthar assumed victory based on specifications. He fought accordingly. He lost accordingly." He paused, looking at Maya. "Rodriguez fought to win. There is a difference." The assembled cadets were still processing. Some looked impressed. Some looked threatened. A few looked like they were reconsidering their entire worldview. Drakthar stood up slowly, waving off the medical technicians. He walked over to Maya, his crystalline structure resonating with something that might have been respect or might have been lingering pain from stress fractures. "That chokehold," he said. "It would not have worked on my physiology." "No," Maya agreed, "but it put me in position to target your structure's stress concentration, which would have worked. You were willing to break me. I was willing to win. Breaking you was just one potential path to that outcome." Drakthar's structure flashed several colors in rapid succession, a Korthvan expression that didn't translate well. "I underestimated you. I underestimated your species." "Yeah," Maya said. "That happens a lot." "Will you teach me? The technique you used? The joint disruption?" Maya considered this. "Sure, but you'll have to teach me how to fight someone with 4 arms. Fair trade." Something that might have been laughter resonated through Drakthar's crystalline structure. Fair trade. Word spread through the Crimson Nexus Military Institute faster than light, which was impressive considering light was supposedly the speed limit. The human beat Drakthar. The human destroyed Drakthar. The human should not have been able to beat Drakthar, but did anyway, which meant either the human was exceptional or everyone's understanding of combat capability was fundamentally flawed. The smart money was on both. Maya's status shifted overnight from invisible to unavoidable. Cadets who'd never acknowledged her existence started asking questions about human combat doctrine. Instructors who'd been content to let her fade into the background started paying attention to her technique. The Institute's Combat Analysis Division requested footage of the fight for their training database. The other 42 human cadets at the Institute suddenly found themselves being taken much more seriously. 3 days after the fight, Maya was summoned to the office of Commandant Thexulos, a Veltorian who'd been running the Institute for 20 years and had seen approximately everything. His office was decorated with commendations, battle flags, and the kind of sparse functionality that suggested he had no time for nonsense. "Sit," he said without preamble. Maya sat. Thexulos studied her with the flat, emotionless gaze that Veltorians were famous for. They were one of the Coalition's founding species, had been fighting wars since before most other species developed agriculture, and had strong opinions about what soldiers should look like. Humans, historically, had not matched those opinions. "Your file," Thexulos said, pulling up a holographic display, "indicates you have prior military experience." "Yes, sir. Private security contractor before joining the Institute." "Private security contractor." He said it the way someone might say, "suspicious person with questionable background." "Your file also indicates this experience was on Earth, before Coalition contact." "Yes, sir." "Which means you learned to fight humans, against humans, using human tactics developed for human conflicts." "Yes, sir." Thexulos leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Do you know why the Coalition was initially hesitant to admit humans to military service?" "Several reasons, sir. lack of natural advantages, unfamiliarity with standard combat doctrine, concerns about discipline and command structure compatibility. All correct. But the primary reason was historical analysis. Every species in the coalition, we have records of their military development. How they fought wars on their homeworld, how they transitioned to space combat, how they integrated into coalition forces. We use this analysis to predict capability and compatibility. He paused significantly. Humanity's military history is concerning. Maya waited. Your species has been engaged in continuous warfare for your entire recorded history. You've developed thousands of distinct combat styles, hundreds of different strategic philosophies, countless weapon systems. You fought wars over resources, ideology, territory, religion, and in several documented cases, because someone insulted someone else. That's accurate, sir. Most species develop warfare as an extension of hunting or territorial behavior. Your species developed hunting as practice for warfare. That's backwards. That's disturbing. Maya had no response to that. It was probably true. What happened with Drakthar, Thexulos continued, was not exceptional skill. It was typical application of human combat doctrine. You studied your opponent, identified weaknesses, exploited them systematically, yes? Yes, sir. And if the power limitation hadn't been in place? If he'd been fighting at full strength? I would have adjusted my tactics accordingly, sir. Probably focused more on evasion and stamina depletion. The principle remains the same. The principle being, everyone has weaknesses. Combat is about finding them faster than your opponent finds yours. Thexulos was quiet for a long moment. That's a very human way of thinking about warfare. Is there another way, sir? Most species think about warfare as a test of strength, a demonstration of capability, a way to prove superiority. That sounds like a good way to lose wars, sir. Something that might have been a smile crossed Thexulos's face. The coalition has been fighting the Crixnull swarm for 40 years. We're not losing, but we're not winning. Standard doctrine doesn't work against them. They don't follow predictable patterns. They adapt rapidly. They exploit weaknesses. He leaned forward. They fight like you just fought, and we don't know how to counter it. Maya was starting to understand where this conversation was going. How would you fight the swarm, Cadet Rodriguez? I'd need to study their patterns, sir. Identify decision-making frameworks. Understand what they're trying to accomplish beyond just winning battles. And then? And then I'd do what humans do. I'd adapt faster, exploit harder, and refuse to fight by their rules. Thexulos nodded slowly. The coalition is reconsidering its position on human military integration. Your performance, and others like it, suggest we may have miscalculated. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. The coalition didn't miscalculate, sir. You measured us against your standards for what soldiers should be. Strong, durable, naturally armed. Humans aren't any of those things. But that's not a weakness. That's just a different set of starting parameters. Explain. Every species here evolved to be the apex predator on their homeworld. You're all accustomed to winning through superior capability. Humans evolved to be persistence predators on a world full of things that could kill us easily. We're accustomed to winning despite inferior capability. That's a fundamentally different approach to problem solving. She paused, then added, You're good at being strong, sir. We're good at being stubborn. Both have their place. Thexulos studied her for another long moment, then dismissed her with a gesture. You're being reassigned to advanced tactical doctrine. Your training schedule will be adjusted accordingly. Dismissed. Maya stood, saluted, and turned to leave. "Cadet Rodriguez," Texulos called after her. "Yes, sir?" "Don't make me regret this." "No, sir." The Crimson Nexus Military Institute continued its operations, training the next generation of coalition military officers. Its curriculum was quietly updated to include sections on asymmetric warfare, cognitive combat advantages, and alternative tactical frameworks. Human enrollment increased by 300% over the next year. The galaxy, slowly and with great reluctance, began to understand that military capability wasn't just about physical specifications. It was about mindset, adaptability, and the willingness to fight in ways that didn't fit neatly into established doctrine. Humans had been doing that since before they invented writing. They just needed an opportunity to demonstrate it to an audience that was finally paying attention. Drakthar, for his part, learned Maya's joint disruption technique and added it to his own combat repertoire. He also learned something more valuable, that the most dangerous opponents weren't always the ones with the best specifications. Sometimes they were the ones who'd spent their entire evolutionary history learning to beat opponents with better specifications. That was a much more important lesson. Maya Rodriguez continued her training, collecting knowledge and experience in roughly equal measure. She graduated with honors, naturally, and went on to serve in several campaigns against the Kriegsnall Swarm, where her particular skills proved extremely valuable. But she never forgot that day in the combat arena, when an overconfident warrior attacked first and learned definitively and painfully that humanity's greatest military advantage wasn't physical capability. It was the absolute refusal to accept that physical capability determined outcomes. Millions of years of being outmatched had taught humans a simple lesson. Specifications were just the opening position. Victory was about what you did with them. And humans, it turned out, were very creative about what they did with limited starting positions. The galaxy was still learning that lesson. Some species learned it quickly, adapted their doctrine, integrated human tactical frameworks into their own strategies. Others learned it the way Drakthar had, suddenly, painfully, and with the kind of clarity that only comes from being systematically dismantled by someone who shouldn't have been able to win. The Crimson Nexus Military Institute updated its recruitment materials. They still emphasized the importance of physical capability, tactical knowledge, and disciplined training. But they also added a new section, buried in the fine print, where all the important truths lived. Combat outcomes are determined by the decisions combatants make under pressure, not by the advantages they possess before the fight begins. It was the most human thing the Institute had ever written, and every cadet who read it, regardless of species, understood exactly what it meant. Underestimate humans at your own risk. Because they'd spent their entire existence being underestimated, and they'd gotten very, very good